Lean on love and walk a little stronger. Lean on love and you will find a way. Let that love be the strength that keeps you going. Lean on love, lean on me. Rest on love, rest on love. When dark of night.
All right, we are live.
Rest on love.
With David Ault today.
See the way. Love will
and I chose this song, David, because it's Lean on Me, and I have leaned on you heavily for the last 8 weeks.
I got you.
Oh, so far, we've had our issues the last year, not personally, but our internet and, and our screen. And right now, everything is linked up and synced and looks good all the way around.
Cool.
I'm really happy about that.
Nice.
So,
and I have started a watch party on my page. Hey, everybody. So when I look down on my phone from my screen, maybe there's a time, right, Jeff, during the broadcast that we might take some questions.
Like a 5 to 10 second delay, I think.
Okay.
So we'll say something and then, somebody may respond, but there's a little bit of a delay. So let's just start off the way we've been, because it's so helpful for me to get centered and do an invocation of health, wealth, and prosperity. I am feeling better these days than I was 8 weeks ago. I think this is our 7th or 8th, one of these. And I
could be one of your longest relationships.
Well, in the last 6 weeks, for sure. No, but this, this has taken on a life of its own, which
it has.
I started off just wanting to talk with you, and I ended up dumping, as my mother so eloquently said one day. I didn't wake up this morning with dumpster labeled across my forehead. I said, "Oh, so you don't want to hear my shit, basically?" And she said, "Yes, Jeff." Anyway, so you have listened to me and allowed me to share what I've been going through in my, without realizing it, I had just exposed myself and willingly to everything that I was feeling and have been living and going through in the last 6 to 8 weeks, based on loss of work and finances and emotional and everything. And what I've discovered, that our dialogue about that has become helpful to many in ways, and they've responded to me through you and telling me that they've heard things that you've said to me. And that has been really helpful, because I was, in a way, expressing things that a lot of people were going through. So, number one, thank you for them for letting me know that, and knowing that I'm not alone. And that's the main reason why I shared. And then thank you for you having wisdom and being able to be in a place that can take what I'm saying and hold it and then respond in such an eloquent and loving way. Thank you for that.
It's my pleasure. And again, I applaud you for your willingness to be so vulnerable in front of people. So, in any kind of open forum like that, you just never know what questions people are going to ask. And there's great wisdom that can erupt from a gathering when somebody asks a question, because I can guarantee you there are so many other people in the room that have the same thing. So when somebody's willing to do that, when somebody's willing to give voice to a confusion, to something they don't necessarily agree with, or something that's uncomfortable, they're the temperature, they're the litmus test by which the rest of the room is navigating around. And so it's important to have that, and you're offering that for a lot of people. So don't take that lightly.
Mm. And I want to be able to accept it and own it. And that was one of the things we were talking about a little ahead of time,
Mm-hmm.
is knowing truth and accepting what others say about me, and having self-awareness and reflecting on it. And when you tell me something, to not discount it,
Mm-hmm.
to listen to it, let it sink in. And then also truth, and how truth feels. And it feels differently when someone says something truthful about us, or something that's truthful. It sits and feels and resonates in a different way. And that was something that I wanted to talk about, because um, there's, and one of the things that I'm looking at moving forward in my new role
Mm-hmm.
in this world, in terms of making money and something that I enjoy, is this platform and doing live interviews and the things I've been doing. And then I look, and this may explain why we're talking about this, is everybody's doing live streaming things. And
Mm-hmm.
then I start thinking about, wow, man, everybody's doing it. Where do I fit in that whole scheme of things? And then I immediately, of course, I'm not good enough. All the self-doubt and everything comes in. So then you said to me, but nobody is you,
Mm-hmm.
and which is the truth. And I need to stay focused on that. So
Well,
owning myself.
why don't we do this? Why don't we
Yeah,
do those invocations that you like so
right,
much, and we'll talk about that more. So whoever you are out there listening, wherever you are, it's so incredibly nourishing, self-nourishing, to stop for a moment, to take a pause, and to breathe. Everything is contained within the breath. So wherever you are, if you can, and whenever you might come across this broadcast, just take a moment and breathe. Breathe deeper than normal. Allow the direction of that oxygen to fill your body. Become reacquainted with the the power that you have, the power of choice to breathe your body, and don't let it become a default mechanism. Allow the breath to be much more deeper, much more resonant, much more directive in wherever within your physical frame it might need some special attention. You have the power to do that. You have the power to bring in breath. And as we gather and listen and converse and talk and discuss and open up, what we know is that whatever arises for us to look at and to speak about is something that is so beautifully and specifically needed for the people who are listening. We know that everything is crafted in a way that opens the heart, that makes the mind think, that allows us to soften and to go into a place of beginner's mind, where we can allow the evaporation of our resistance and this egoic thing that says, I know that already, or the thing that wants to hold allegiance to some small narrative. That beginner's mind wipes all of that clean. And we come together in this moment in time with that ability, that freshness, that purity that says, I'm willing to hear, I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to be renewed, I'm willing to hit the reset button and allow all of my negative self-speak to dissolve, at least for this moment. And so with that as our agreement, we move forward now, and we know that all is good. All is good, and we let it be so. And so it is. All right. So you said to me when we were testing before you started to tape that you're enjoying this, obviously, that this is something that organically unfolded
mhm.
out of necessity, that you as a What's your exact title? You're an event producer?
Uh, I've worn that hat on a number of occasions, but generally speaking, the last 4 years I've been a sound engineer
Okay.
and just
But
do live sound.
but it's sound engineering for very large events and large gatherings, and
Yeah,
being sort of the go-to guy in Southern California and beyond. I know you many times. I've seen you in Las Vegas and doing all of these big things. So crowds are something that have been a part of your heritage. That's been your moneymaker. That's been the thing that you've associated yourself with. And as the global landscape begins to shift, this is what you've unearthed. This is what you have uncovered in a way to not only express your frustration and fears, but to also gravitate to something that feeds your passion. So
mm.
you get to talk to people, you've had your friends on. How many shows have you done in 7 or 8 weeks?
I've done 90 shows
Wow,
and I've had 55 guests.
it's amazing. And
And
so you were saying to me before we started, I really like this, right?
mhm,
And then you followed that with, but there's so many other people doing this.
mm,
And then I said, yeah, but they're not Jeff Noose.
true.
And so how did that make you feel when I said that?
Um, there is an old tape that plays in me that says I'm not good enough and don't get conceited or don't own anything that's good about you because people won't like that.
Okay.
And what I know is in a higher spiritual sense, that is absolutely true. There is no one else like me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same for everybody else. And there is space for everybody. And everybody deserves a voice. And some people are going to like my voice and some people aren't. And that's
Mm-hmm.
just the nature of things. And that's a higher minded spiritual sense of it. But
Mm-hmm.
that old voice that comes in, don't take that compliment because I don't want anybody to think that, oh, there's nobody. And
Right.
that isn't really how I take it. But I learned that from a child. Don't get conceited or don't think you're too good because people aren't going to like you if you're that way.
So you got two things going on here. And the first thing is, I said, yeah, but nobody's gonna do it like you. Nobody's gonna be the broadcaster that is Jeff Noose. And
Right.
so think about this for a moment. Um, if somebody wanted to sit down and write a love song, do you think somebody would go, "Oh, don't write a love song because there's already been love songs written"? So there will always be an infinite supply of love songs that
Mm,
continue to come from the birthing process of creativity within the specific persona individual of the one who feels compelled to write it. And I remember my first book that I wrote, and I was trying to do all of these mindful exercises and go to bookstores and visualize the spine of my book and the self-help thing. And instead of that actually benefiting me or being this meaningful practice, I remember being in some Barnes and Noble in Los Angeles and looking and going, holy crap, there's so many books. Who needs another book?
mm,
And I was just overcome with all of the sudden that I was wasting my time. And then the idea of, yeah, you're right. There's not one original idea out there. There's not one original idea out there. And yet, no one is going to express what you want to express like you.
mm,
They're just not. So you have to trust that. You have to honor that creative spark or that propulsion inside of you that wants to create and express. You have to honor that and trust that nobody's going to do it through the lens of you. And that's when the idea of the song and understanding, yeah, there is no new topic that hasn't been
right.
discussed, right?
Yeah.
And so don't fall into that. That's a trap. That's a trap that keeps us all playing in these sort of back burner lives. And you gotta take whatever it is that comes to you that you feel compelled to do, and you gotta move it to the front burner. It doesn't mean that it may work out exactly the way that you thought, but something of benefit's going to come from that. As you lean more into the broadcasting, something of benefit is going to open up this world that you would never have experienced if you had solely caved into the voice that says, there's just too many out there,
Mm.
right? So, I mean, how many versions of a hamburger are there? How many sitcoms are there? How many romance novels? How many spy dramas? I mean, how many statues carved out of marble? Can you imagine if people just thought, "Oh, what's the point?" Then we wouldn't have the ongoing uh, expression of art and creativity that continues to come forth from us. It's probably one of the best things that we do as a
Right.
species. So
Right.
don't squash that.
I One thing that I do have to learn is I have to learn how to accept, and I try to teach this to my daughter.
Mhm.
I need to accept that when something is good in me, to own it and saying that yes,
Mhm.
what, for example, if somebody come up and says, ask me the question, are you a good drummer? Yes, I'm a very good drummer. Am I David Garibaldi, Jerry Brown, or any of those guys that I look up to? No, but I'm a really good drummer. Are you a good sound guy? Yes, I'm a really good sound guy.
Mhm.
And are you a good dad? Yes, I'm a really good dad. There's always
Can you say those things without qualifiers? Like the
well,
first one, you said, "Yes, I'm a really good drummer. I'm not as good," so that's a qualifier. Can you just say,
mm,
"Yeah, I'm a really good drummer,"
yeah, yeah.
and let that be enough? And why do you think you or any of us put in those qualifiers? Because you were saying that was part two, right? So now is don't get too full of yourself or you're not good
Right.
enough. What's that about?
Mm,
And why do those things, those themes, I call them themes, why do we keep revisiting them and giving them life over and over and over again when they don't serve us? So
mm.
what's the belief behind the theme? What's the thing that makes you keep going back to the theme over and over again and defaulting to it or giving it your power?
Wow. Self doubt, inadequacy, y- you know, all of the stuff that I seem to combat my
Mhm.
entire life of not being good enough.
And with everything, because not being good enough, I don't know anyone that breathes on the planet who doesn't have a version of that theme,
Right.
unless they're a complete total narcissistic psychopath or something.
Well, there are a
but,
few of those.
but those of us who have some kind of compassion in our heart, we walk around with self-doubt, some of us walking around with crippling self-doubt. And and what happens when we keep feeding that theme is that on some level we get to be right. We get to be right about the fact that we're not good enough. We get to be right about that seed that was planted from a moment or a comment of a parent, a guardian, a teacher, someone in the household who in their own moment of projection put that on us and we accepted it as truth. And so that means that we don't ever have to take responsibility to change.
Mm,
We don't ever have to lean into the mystery. We don't ever have to uh, step away from what's familiar. We don't ever have to push the boundary of our capabilities. We can be comfortable because we get to keep that theme alive by living in a marginal way.
I just had this thought while you were speaking. The minute I own and accept what I am,
Mhm.
I then have to be responsible for the outcome. And
Well,
well, or
yes and no. You have to be responsible for honoring the creative spark that wants to pull you out of your comfort zone. You're not responsible for like how it's received.
mm,
You're only responsible for saying yes to the urge.
mm,
See, the other part of feeling responsible about the outcome, that's worrying about what other people are going to think. That's the thing that stops you.
right.
Because you and I and so many other we're so concerned about making a mistake, about doing it wrong. If we could free ourselves from the paralyzation of doing it wrong, then we would take more risk.
Mm,
We would lean more into the mystery, and we would allow ourselves to expand in a way that we don't, because we're trying to fit in this societal protocol that says, that's impetuous, or that's unskillful, or that's careless or reckless. I look at the word risk. you know Take a risk. What does that actually mean, a risk? Because I think we've made that a bad word.
mm,
What if risk is a natural part of our evolution? If
mm,
you as a baby didn't risk trying to stand up, trying to pull yourself up, then you'd be crawling around for the rest of your life. Nobody goes, "Oh my God, don't risk that," because that innate desire to do something beyond what you've been doing is a natural thing.
mm.
So, is it a risk, or is it a natural inner propulsion? But we're going around calling everything a risk, as
Mm,
if that's a dirty word.
mm,
And if something doesn't work out, okay. But we become so, God, we just become so cautious all the time, and that makes us sterile. That
mm.
makes our creativity sterile. It makes our thinking sterile. It makes everything so lukewarm and boring. And yet we get to be right. We get to be comfortable. We get to stay in our lane and what's familiar. And um, it isn't popular.
Mm.
But would you rather be popular and safe, or would you rather explore and lean into the calling and the expansion of what your heart wants?
Well, right now, uh, I want to lean into this because I enjoy talking with people. And if there's ever anything that I'm really good at, it's I can talk.
You can, and you're good, and you pay attention, and you ask provocative questions, and you're real. You're so real, Jeff. And that's why doing this, I think it's just an organic, natural thing.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine one of these days you're going to go, "I am so glad that a pandemic happened
Well,
to
I'm
disrupt my world."
it did. And everybody has followed me from the minute I had my meltdown, oh my God, what am I going to do? To now I'm feeling optimistic and I'm asking about what I'm going to do with my new adventure and
Mhm.
this new and how I'm going to lean into that and taking risks. And so this is, it has been a growing experience for me. And it, there's never been a moment in history where I've always wanted to be able to just sit and talk to people and never felt qualified.
Right. So what were you telling me? You got an invite to something and you felt unqualified in being in the circle?
Right. So a lot of people don't know about me, and why I know you is because of my involvement in the New Thought movement of science of mind, the uh, and that's now changed. What's it called now? The
Centers for Spiritual Living.
Centers for Spiritual Living and Agape uh, International
You're,
Spirit Center.
yeah, so you're in that large community in Los Angeles of New Thought thinkers and,
Right.
progressive thinking.
Right. So I've been heading in that direction almost my whole life, but then the last 20 years, I've been pretty involved in, because of the production end of it, I've been able to meet all of the leaders of the movement. And I'm pretty good friends with them,
Mm-hmm.
like yourself. And I had Maggie Cole on as a guest, and a bunch of people tuned in. And then I was invited to join a group of some people in Santa Rosa. And I could feel how they talked to me the minute I entered the room. It's like, oh, it's Jeff. Oh, look, and I felt admired and it felt good. But at the same time, I felt so uncomfortable because I have never really I've always felt like an outsider looking in at the movement because I've not really went to any classes. I've not taken anything to become a practitioner or any of those kinds of things. I just believe all of the exact same things that you teach.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always felt like an outsider looking in, and I felt so unqualified to be there. And like, there's nothing I can really say to these people other than just listen, because they participate in it in a general way all the time. So from that point of view, I felt, man, I'm in this community, but I'm not really qualified to be in it from a leader point of view, especially if somebody now might see me from that way. And that's sort of how it felt.
Mm.
I-
Yeah, and you know, I think it would be delicious to dive in and to go, I wonder where that feeling comes from for you, rather than just correct your feeling and say, oh, Jeff, don't feel that way. I don't want to do that. I want to go, let's look at the juiciness of this and go, I wonder where this idea of being unqualified comes from, right? Did we ever talk about, because I use this a lot in my teachings, the 6 second moment? Does that ring a bell?
No, I think this is something that we need to hear.
you're you're so you're so compatible, compliant. Well, no, it's just that you know something something that could have taken 6 seconds. So that's not a long time, right? 6 seconds still governs the way that you think about yourself to this very day.
Mm.
So it could have been an offhanded comment from a teacher, a parent. Oh, little Susie doesn't know how to do math. She's never going to be good in the world. Little Susie hears that, and all of a sudden, without realizing it, she's adopted this belief that lands in the pit of her subjective nature. And she just unconsciously accepts that she will never be good at that. Karen Drucker, who you and I love dearly,
Mm-hmm.
had a teacher who told her in music class that she would never amount to anything, that she wasn't good enough to be a singer. And so that makes me so in awe of her process and where she is now as an adult, because how did she flip the script? What was it within her that says, I'm not going to accept that? So that 6 second moment didn't stop her. But you and I have a bundle of 6 second moments within us that were nothing more than offhanded comments or projections from other people who were experiencing their own self-doubt, their own shit.
Mm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when someone makes those types of things, and so for me, the memory that came back once I started doing my own spiritual work was at 7 years old, my father died. And I was the baby of a tribe of children. And so there weren't enough bedrooms to go around. And so I slept on a cot in the corner of my parents' bedroom. And my dad was a veteran. And so when the VA hospital called in the middle of the night to tell my mom that my dad passed away, I was right there. It was one of the old rotary phones in the hallway by her door. So I could hear the conversation. I could even hear the attendant nurse telling her. I could hear it all. And she hung up the phone. And then she picked it back up and she did the rotary dial and she called my aunt, told her what happened. And then she said this: "What am I supposed to do with a 7-year-old boy?" And I heard that. That's a 6-second moment. And in that 6-second moment, I remember, no, I don't remember. What am I saying? I don't remember. But somehow I took it upon myself to go, wow, I'm a burden.
Mm.
However it was that I absorbed that from the framework of a 7-year-old child, I took that in and I absorbed that and I calculated, or I came up with the assumption that I was a burden. And that if I was going to stay in this family dynamic, I was going to really have to be careful, or I was going to have to work my ass off, or whatever it was, because I was in the way. Now, it wasn't until I was an adult, I was doing things like conscious breath work, or they used to call it rebirthing in the 1980s with a woman named Sandra Ray, that memory came back up. Like I was back there again. And that's when the whole process of that interpretation came back, and seeing the choice. And I was fascinated because I looked at how that one pivotal moment colored and shaped all of the choices of the way in which I showed up in my early life, the way in which I was an actor when I was young, and how I felt like I was the worst person in the room, or I was going to have to work harder than everybody else. But the real revelation was the fact that what my mother said had nothing to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
That was her stuff. My projection and the interpretation of what she said, I get to own. But what she said had nothing to do with me. But here I am making it have to do everything about me, making it my identity. And that's the thing, that when something like a 6-second moment goes unchecked or unexamined, then you and I are walking around with a whole bundle of 6-second moments and all the masks then that we create and wear in order to navigate our way through the world. And we have absolutely no idea who we are, because we're so fragmented. We're just bits and pieces of everybody else's opinion, rather than going, you know what my mother said doesn't have anything to do with me, but I took it to have everything to do with me. So that's on me. And if I want to unburden myself of the belief that I'm a burden, it's not going to come from her. It's got to come from me. So whatever it is that makes you feel like you're unqualified, wouldn't it be curious to know what was the genesis or the 6-second moment that fed that narrative?
I can't even begin right now at this moment to imagine.
And here's the other thing. It's not necessary. It's not necessary that you know it, but to consider the fact that that had to come from somewhere. Because there's no truth to that other than the fact that you keep returning to that, or owning it as a valid point, or something that is an identifier with regards to who you are, and it's not.
Right. So I have a comment about wanting to, one of the things that we talked a little bit beforehand, what I want to do is to be able to own myself, be true and honest and self aware to what that is,
Mm-hmm.
and be whole and feel okay with that and own it and express it. And this is peeling away at yet another layer. You know, a couple of weeks ago, we were peeling away at a layer that was painful and hurting, and we kind of dug at that. This is a layer that I'm starting to examine in order to move forward. And now I'm curious because I actually have been looking down, and there's been lots of comments on our conversation. And one thing that I wanted to be able to do as we move forward is there someone that you have had mention anything that they've had a trouble with similarly, or they had similar experiences? Do you have any? Uh,
I don't have anything in my feed. The wonderful Kim Summers said, "I so appreciate the authenticity here." So
yeah,
again, that's because you've provided this space. But what comments do you have on your feed?
kind of the same thing. You know that they appreciate that what we're doing. And one guy says when John Carlson, when I first discovered your live streams, I thought for sure you were a well-known, seasoned online interview host. Well, man, I
See,
baked it really well. um, so, yeah, just little comments, kind of like double mint gum. Got a nothing, no real questions, just people saying that they like what we're doing.
and if you guys want to comment, we've got what, another little bit of time. So
Yeah. So now this is one thing that I have to say has really been wonderful this time is there hasn't really been any audio and video glitches, which which is really good. And the other thing that I want to say is when you say to me that finding out something about me is a delicious morsel or however you express it, I'm thinking, oh boy. I've never had anybody express to me in all of the years of therapy that have ever been, and they're trying to get to something. Nobody has ever said, let's pull out this delicious morsel of this about you.
of
It's
human behavior, yeah, become curious as to why we operate the way that we operate. Become
right.
curious about what pushes your injustice buttons. Become curious as to why you find yourself in a loop,
Mm,
where you're back at some particular thing. Um, because in that curiosity, there's a healing there. There's an opportunity because now you're not pushing it away or burying it or turning your head. You're leaning into it. And in the leaning in and the curiosity of wanting to understand, you're compassionately willing to let your identities dissolve. So I have, let's see, Kim Summers says, will you talk about what our real opportunity is within the experience of this current pandemic?
you're watching me unfold. This is my
and
current.
and yeah, and she Kim's asking like a general question for everybody, like what is the real opportunity? Well, the only real opportunity that ever exists in anything is to love more. And as unfortunately, that's going to sound cliched and trite and very simplistic, but there's power in the simplicity, right? So what does it mean to love more? Yeah, the fuel for love is found within connection. And when we become a society that doesn't connect, you and I have never connected like this consistently now for 7+ weeks.
Right.
People are connecting more or finding unique ways to connect. And I'm not saying it's all roses and butterscotch for everybody, because there's a lot of trauma that goes on in households. And that's because of not knowing how to connect. But when we can begin to own a sense of resolve within ourselves, and we have to be with ourselves, we have to look at the uncomfortableness that comes with having to look at ourselves rather than being caught up in the day-to-day activity. This is like a this is a ripe and rare opportunity for us as a species to learn how to connect, to learn what's important, to see the vulnerability right up front and be able to lean in and not turn away from the vulnerability of others, but to help them, to feed them. And so to me, the real opportunity is, how do I optimize that? How do I not keep turning away? How do I keep not numbing out?
Mhm.
It's so easy to become a walking, breathing, eating, drinking Netflix machine, rather than sometimes just sitting in the quiet and in the stillness and feeling the feelings,
Mm.
feeling the fear, feeling the uncertainty, not burying your head, not medicating, but turning to it and leaning into it. Because it's only when you do that, it's only when we confess the feeling, express the feeling, that we're actually able to begin to let the foundations that we have built begin to dissolve. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
We've built the foundations that says that this is this and this is this and this is wrong and this is what we've built, those foundations. And when we don't connect with one another, when we don't listen, when we don't begin to want to become curious in the deliciousness of someone's wounding, not to enhance the wounding, but to help them dismantle the wounding,
Mm.
then nothing ever happens. And we as a species have failed.
I, I I have one thought before there were a couple of questions now I want to get to, but I just want to throw this out there. I was taught from a young child that there was something scary and not good about self-examination and wanting to know something about myself and
Wow.
learn.
Who taught you that?
My parents for and this experience was quite memorable at 5 years old. My father was a part Native American, drunk of the worst kind that beat everybody in the
I
house.
remember you told me this. So this was in
Right,
Nebraska, right?
right.
Okay.
And my mother was a pill popping junkie because trying to, deal with it. So she was heavy into Valium and that sort of thing. And there were issues in the family dynamic, obviously, but the two of them didn't want to own it. It wasn't them. So because my dad always made everything out to be my problem, at 5 years old, they took me to see a psychiatrist,
Oh, wow.
and I was the problem. And there was something really scary and ugly and uh, trying to figure out at 5 years old what was my issue, and this is not anything that this isn't supposed to be a delicious fun thing. I mean, this is, and from that time on I was taught that a revealing of yourself or everything is something that only mentally ill people do,
Mm.
right? So any kind of crying, any kind of focus on self or trying to discover it, that if you do that, you're a sick person. There's
Wow.
something wrong with you. So uh, it's only recently that I've sort of got okay with just dumping it out there.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned, but it just occurred to me that as you were sharing, is where along the way did we change, had this learning about ourselves become not okay or scary or something that we don't really do? Why haven't we been taught, hey, this is exciting, oh, isn't that cool that you learned that new thing about yourself?
Mm-hmm.
I don't, I I'm around more people that are like that now,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't come from that. I come from it's scary. So
Yeah.
let me just say, and from that perspective, Toby Simmons says, I invite constructive feedback. Is that normal?
Hmm.
And
What's normal? Normal is in the eyes of the one who's making those labels. If that works for Toby, then and she feels nurtured by that, then continue to do that. But I don't want to pass up the revelation that you just had,
mm,
and that is at 5 years old. Look at the amount of responsibility that was put on you to have to manage your feelings.
mm,
Look at the amount of responsibility that was put upon you at 5 years old to have to make a judgment call about what is and isn't safe in terms of your expression. So,
mm,
already, almost straight out of the gate, you had to come up with a set of masks to wear in order to just feel safe
mm.
around your growing environment. And at what point did you grow weary of wearing those masks? But why would your your parents who were suffering through their own addiction want to take you to a psychiatrist in order to feed a narrative that you were the problem? And then
Mm.
you accepted the fact that you were the problem.
Right.
And
I,
so obviously that's a gross misjustice, uh, injustice put upon you in terms of squashing your natural ability to just learn and to expand and to explore your own feelings.
I agree. And I think that at some level, almost all families, this is just speculation, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I see a lot of parents do that to their children in one form or another. And children, by the time they're 7, have lost all joy in learning.
And so there are many things to unpack with all of this, but here's the main thing in the time that we have. You don't repeat that with your daughter, Mackenzie.
I do not. Yeah.
So isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
So whatever is the multi-generational component that's been handed down cellularly in terms of that behavior, it stopped with you with regards to Mackenzie.
Right.
And that is the greatest victory. And you never stop also revisioning that part of you as the 5-year old that gets to learn that it's okay, that it is safe to explore, that it is okay to be messy in your feelings, that it is
Mm.
okay to not have it all together and to be vulnerable and to express. And there won't be people who will judge or discard you.
Right.
But that has to take place again within the inner realm of your belief system, your atmosphere. And the more that you own that, what happens out there?
It gets better.
The more you the more people mirror that acceptance back to you.
I
And so the biggest misconception is that we want it to be fixed out there first.
mm,
But look, whatever it is that you did that walked into an atmosphere of some type of philosophy that pulled you into this idea of taking that responsibility for navigating your own path of self-love
mm.
is the thing that makes your outer world and your outer experience change.
Yeah, I just want to share one thing before I read this next question. Um, Mackenzie and I had a heartfelt. I think I described it to you last week because she would had been told that she was a by her the ex and
Mm-hmm.
the people that were around that she was hard to deal with, and I don't have that experience with her. And as I listened to her tell me, I sat and give myself a lot of time to think about a loving, healthy way to respond to her in a way that she would feel accepted and heard, and that I wouldn't advise,
Mm-hmm.
but I would just nurture her. And all I could think about was, how am I going to nurture her through this so she can use it as a healthy experience rather than she's a bad person?
Right.
And everything turned out really well. We ended up crying together. But it felt good that I give myself permission to sit and not have to be a parent and not respond a certain way, but let it evolve in a way that was loving. But I wanted to get this. I'm not trying to minimize anything in what you just said, but I do want to let these people know that I am watching and getting their questions. There is a
Mm-hmm.
question for you. How are you dealing with not being able to travel to exotic places these days? Uh, and I'm thinking of that for you, especially. That was from Kimberly. No, that's from Carla Ross. And it may be some time before you can. And I'm thinking of that for you because you have uh, people that you help and centers in other parts of the world that you are helping children, and you want to revisit that for you, or a little bit what you're doing, and when do you think?
Yeah, I just want to
Oh,
just put a little button on what we
okay.
talked about though, and just and acknowledge the fact that your journey was not for naught,
Mm,
and the work that you've done has culminated into just what you talked about a few weeks ago when you sat with Mackenzie and you listened to her, and you dug deep inside to make sure that she felt seen and heard. And that's all that we're really here to do,
mm,
is to take the experiences of our past and all of the things that would be our wounding, and not to have be stopped by that wounding, so that we can continue to serve one another. And you've done that. You've done that. So don't rush too fast away from that. And with regards to my work, I have administrators who run my schools in India and in Cambodia. Like the rest of the world, the schools have been closed, but our families, particularly in India, that are in slums and um, are having a challenged time, we've been doing things to create food programs for them and get them food. And those are just the things that I've been heavily doing every day in order to manage and keep the foundation running until there's some stability with regards to children returning. But who knows when I will be able to go back?
mm, yeah.
There's it's a big if for everybody.
I I want to just point out, because I spent years in lots of different therapy situations. You are brilliant at helping me not escape a little learning moment. thank thank you for that. And my my whole thing is, I needed to let you to finish and help me put a button on that, as you said. And at the same time, I really want others to be heard and seen too.
Mhm.
So you are so gentle at how you move with me, which is such refreshing, because uh, I've never divulged all of the different therapy and stuff that I've done. Before, 20 years ago, it, I had so many people that went to school as therapists and they should never have been therapists. You know, and I, man, and then I, yeah, and I know we've all talked to some of those people.
Yeah. Well, and for what it's worth, you're not who you were back then.
That, yeah.
So you've done your work too, and maybe some of the things that they did do stayed with you and you don't realize it. But um, we keep finding our place in the world based upon how much we're willing to do our work.
Mm,
And yeah, there are people who are fits and people who are not fits, and yet we learn just as much from the people who aren't a fit,
mm,
because that's a part of the refinement. Um, it's the same thing with relationships. We continue to learn what it is that we desire and want from the ones that don't work out. So
mm,
rather than spending time in regret or wishing that it hadn't happened, no, all of those things have been of benefit in order to get you and I to where we are today.
mm,
And that's huge. It's huge to not have regret. It's huge to honor the entirety of your journey.
mm,
And it sounds poetic and beautiful, but there's so much about our lives that we want to compartmentalize and make go away. But when we can really turn to all of it, and look at it, and like we talked about before, become curious about it, because that's the gateway into our own thinking and our own belief system, even the things that are unconscious and the things that we have numbed out on.
mm,
And so, as I indicated before, I'm not fully there. There are still things I'm unpacking, and
mm,
so as we continue to do that, um, as you take responsibility for your life and I take responsibility for my life, there is this sort of energetic permission that we give other people to do the same.
mm, mm. And we're getting close to wrapping it up, but the thought that just occurred to me again as we've been talking and others have been watching uh, and hopefully getting something out of this and learning that the fact that I'm opening up and being vulnerable isn't necessarily anything uh, that yes, I should applaud myself for being willing to do it, but I would like to give everybody permission to be able to do that because our way out of this is learning how to be human again and understand that there's nothing wrong with grieving. There's nothing
Mm-hmm.
wrong with being afraid. There's nothing wrong with being angry. And they're all parts of our emotional being that now is starting to ooze out based on this current pandemic. And let's not be afraid of them, but use them as you so eloquently put it as morsels to learn from. And let's grab onto that as a place to move through this so we can become more loving and
Mm-hmm.
understanding and have more compassion with others. I think I've learned so much from you just in these last 6 weeks based on my own experience and hoping that this radiates outward towards others. That's just what I'm hoping.
Uh, my friend Aaron McGowan says, "What are the issues you feel so urgent about that you take immediate action when they show up?" Um, there's a lot, and each of us has those particular issues that sort of heat us up. The one thing that I would say about the action that we take is that it has to come from vision.
Mm,
Any action that we take with regards to something that is heated or something that feels like an injustice, and again, you whether you subscribe to this or not, is that you can't go into a systemic issue with the energy of I'm going to fight against the systemic issue. Because if I do, then I will burn out. And the bitterness that is birthed from that approach is something that will consume me. If I meet it with inflammation, then I become inflamed. So somehow, some way, in spite of all of the noise and the seduction of the noise, I have got to remember the vision. And so what is the vision? The vision has to be something that is solution driven. I cannot allow myself to be pulled into mob mentality. I cannot allow myself to go to sleep. I have to find a way to continue to ignite the vision. So for me, the vision is feeding people, loving people, listening to people, letting them be heard. It isn't about big picture projects. It's about the basic fundamentals of what you just said, kindness and compassion. And if I can do that to a handful of people every single day, not just the ones that it's easy to do that, but if I can do that in places where it's sticky and places that is someone said the other day, filled with assholery. If I can find a way to do that, then I don't default into the land of zombie. And I have to believe in my heart of hearts that that's all that any of us can do. And then that the things that are diametrically opposed to that, the things that are systemic, will somehow, some way dissolve. And that what is left is the stakes and the foundation of that compassion and that listening and that feeding someone. And so I've gotten too lost in the minutia of the doing. And what I have forgotten in the past is the simplicity of just loving people where they're at. I don't need to convince them right or wrong. It's not my job to change their mind. It's only my job to love and to serve and to help myself remember and to help other people remember as well. And sorry if that is going to come off as too simplistic for people or too Pollyanna for people, but Pollyanna got a bad rap because Pollyanna had it going on. Pollyanna is the guru, and there's nothing lukewarm or tepid about that. That's the thing that burns. That's the thing that burns within the illuminated heart. That's the thing that's going to fix and transform. And when my administrator in India, whose family lives in the slum, when we gave him money to go purchase food to feed the families of the children who come to our school, and when he got so inspired by that he took his own money that he had collected and he went and bought more food, because every single day he has to step over beggars in the alleyways to get home. And he took his own money that he was trying to save to buy another motorbike, the motorbike that had been stolen at the beginning of March. Then that's the example of what we're here to do. He took his own money and he went and bought more food and he distributed it to the beggars in the alleyway outside of Bodh Gaya, India, where he was, because we said we have to do things like this. We have to feed people. And I had to tell people about him. I had to write people about him in my newsletter, people who had signed up through my website. And I said, our foundation doesn't have the money to buy him a new motorbike right now. And this guy needs a motorbike. He deserves a motorbike. And it costs $1,500 to buy a motorbike. And I got $4,000 last week in donations. And so next week, he's getting surprised. And as
Mm.
soon as businesses open up, and they're supposed to on May 17th, he gets a new motorbike.
Oh.
To me, that is as equal as stopping a world war.
Mm. Yeah.
Because giving him the space to awaken and to find what is important, and for him to take action on that, that's why we're here. For you, you did the same thing with Mackenzie.
Mm.
You did the same thing with Mackenzie by loving her and validating her feelings.
Mm.
And that's what we're here to do. And that's it. It's not complicated, people. It's just stop the bullshit and just find a way to love somebody. Our time is up.
It is, but it needed a pause. It needed a pause because you brought me to tears with your story and doubled down with bringing Mackenzie and showing me that too again. So you have again taught me so much, and I can't help but say again thank you for being here, and all of the people that have tuned in. And I know we had a consistent, right at like 18 pretty much the whole time, which which is good for me. And I know what happens is many people watch it back, and I hope that everybody watches it back because you always have a great message. And I appreciate that, and I love you for being here. Thank you.
I love you, Jeff. And we'll keep going. We'll
Yes.
keep going.
So I'm going to close this out with your song that we started off with, and let people listen to that too for a few minutes. And thank you.
All right. I'll see you next week.
Else has failed you. Count on love, and soon you will agree. Love fulfills all the searching and the longing. Count on love. Count on me. Call on love when fear is all you're hearing.